Hey folks, this lesson is the imaginary number I. So don't forget all your lessons can be found at that groovy website right there. Okay, let's get started with this. So in the history of math, now if you see any purple writing, if you're in my class, don't worry about writing the purple stuff down. But the black and the blue texting, I want you to write down. Anyways, in the history of math, they've always created new numbers. When they first started thousands of years ago, we had just counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. So then we invented negative numbers. They didn't even have negative numbers, and that let us solve, simple equations like x plus 3 equals 2. And then similarly, later in life, then they invented what's called irrational numbers, and they can do some more math with that. So x squared equals 5, and so it would be x equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And the square root of 5 is an irrational number, like the number pi is another irrational number. All right, so now look at the equation x squared equals negative 1. Well, this equation has no real solutions because the square of any real number is never going to be negative. So that's where we invented the imaginary number I, and then we can do some math with that. So here's what the definition of I is, you guys. I is the square root of negative 1. So if we squared both sides, then remember when you square a radical, it makes the radical disappear. So I squared equals negative 1. Okay, so I equals square root of negative 1, and I squared equals negative 1. All right, now watch this pattern that happens here. Okay, I is square root of negative 1. I squared is negative 1. So I cubed is just I squared times I. And since I squared is negative 1, then this is going to be negative 1 times I, which is just negative I. All right, I to the fourth is just I to the third times I, and since I to the third is simplified to negative I right there, then we'll put in negative I right there, so negative I times I, follow me? Negative I squared, and since I squared is negative 1, it's negative negative 1, which is positive 1. All right, I to the fifth. You'll see why. There's a pattern that happens, you guys. Okay, I to the fifth is I to the fourth times I, and since I to the fourth is 1, then we get 1I. Okay, and then I to the sixth. I to the sixth is I to the fifth, and since I to the fifth is I times I is I squared, which is negative 1. Okay, look. Can you see a pattern? Here's I to the fifth, it came out to I, and then I to the sixth came out to negative 1. I to the seventh, I think, is going to come out to that, and this might be I to the eighth. Let's see. I to the seventh, you guys, is I to the sixth times I, and since I to the sixth is negative 1, then we get negative 1 times I, which is negative I. Look, that's the same right there. I to the eighth is probably going to come out to 1 right there. I to the eighth is I to the seventh times I to the seventh is negative I, so negative I times I is negative I squared, and since I squared is negative 1, then we have negative negative 1, which is 1. Okay, look, it's following a pattern. Let's do one more. I to the ninth. I to the ninth is probably going to come up to this right here, which is this right here. It's following a pattern of 4. Okay, so I to the ninth is I to the eighth times I, and I to the eighth is 1. So we get 1 times I, which is just I. Okay, so here's the pattern right here. So all right, so I want you, if you're in my class, to write this down. So imaginary numbers follow this pattern, I1, negatives in the middle. And I know you're thinking, what does that mean? Okay, I1, negatives in the middle. I1, you put negatives in the middle right here. Now what does that mean? Well, that just means this is I to the first, I to the second, I to the third, I to the fourth. It's also I to the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, okay? It's also I to then just pick up. This will be I to the ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th. Okay, this is always I to the multiples of 4 is 1. Okay, so I1, negatives in the middle. I1, negatives in the middle. This would be I to the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. This is all multiples of 4. I to the multiples of 4. I1, negatives in the middle. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. All right, so let's simplify. So square root of negative 5 is the square root of negative 1 times positive 5, and the square root of negative 1 is I, so it's I root 5. Okay, so this one's the square root of negative 1 times positive 36, so we get I times 6, which is 6I. Okay, this one is going to be, now I always say pull the I out, you guys. So pull the I out. When you have a square root of a negative, it's an I. So let's pull the I out. and then simplify root 50. Okay, square root of 25 times 2, square root of 25 is 5, so you got the I out there, so it's 5I root 2. Okay, all right, so similarly, this is I, and then this square root of 16 is 4, so this is 4I, and this is 7I, so 4I plus 7I is 11I. Okay, all right, let's keep going. Okay, now i's work a little bit differently, you guys. You can't do a negative times a negative and become a positive. You have to pull the i's out first. So this is 2i right here, because this is pull the I out here. This is 5i. So 2i times 5i is 10i squared. Remember, I squared is negative 1, so it's 10 times negative 1, which is negative 10. Okay. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I1, negatives in the middle. I1, negatives in the middle. Think of a multiple of 4 that's close to 34. Well, this is I to the 32. So if this is I to the 32, then this is I to the 32, so this will be 33, 34. Okay, so this will be negative 1. Okay, so there's I to the 34. So I to the 34 equals negative 1, so it's negative 34. Okay, let's try this again. All right, now when you get into big numbers, you just look at the last two digits. The trick on multiples of 4 is look at the last two digits. Think of 40. 40 is a multiple of 4. So this is I to the 140 right there. So this is 141, 42, 43. Okay, so that's what I like to think right there. So I to the 143 is negative I. Okay, remember, I1, negatives in the middle. And these are all the multiples of 4. And when you have big numbers, you just look at the last two digits. That's your multiple of 4. Okay, so here's I to the 143. So it's going to be negative I. So this is negative 143 times negative I, which is positive 143I, because a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay. All right, you just can't do that inside the radicals when there's a negative and a negative inside, because you got some i's happening right there. All right, so here, let's pull the i's out. Okay, 75 is 25 times 3, so this is 5, and then we'll put this inside 5 with this inside 3 right here. So don't forget we got I times I, so it's I squared outside, so 5I squared root 15. Don't forget I squared is negative 1, so it's negative 5 root 15. Okay, let's pull the i's out. Okay, now when the i's are like this, you can cancel them. Okay, I over I cancels, all right? And then the square root of 9 is this 3 right here. So now we're going to go ahead and do 4 times 3, but let's do this. 2 goes into 4 twice, so it's actually 2 times 3. So 2 times 3 is 6, so we have 6 root 2 over root 3. Can't have this radical downstairs. You can't have an I downstairs either. We'll deal with that in a minute. So let's multiply this by root 3 over root 3. Okay, so we get 6 root 6 over 3, and then since these are both outside, we can cancel. We just can't cancel an insidey with an outsidey. Okay, they both got to be either insides or outsides. So these both are not in a radical, so we can go ahead and cancel. 3 goes into 6 twice, so the answer is 2 root 6. Okay, all right, so here you guys, now these are both inside, so we can cancel these. 6 goes into 18 3 times, so it's root 3, okay, over 2i. This is square root of 1. Square root of 1 is just 1, so 2i. Now we can't have an I downstairs, so like over here we can't have this radical 3. We're going to multiply it by I over I. So let's multiply this by I over I, and that gets rid of the i's downstairs, because I squared is negative 1. Okay, and then so pull that negative out in front. Never leave the negative in the denominator. Your teacher will always take points off. I will if you're in my class, you guys. It's tacky to leave a negative in the denominator, so just float it out in front of the fraction, okay? So we get negative I root 3 over 2. All right? Okay, so let's solve some equations. Okay, so we're going to subtract 81, and we get a negative number, and we square root, and don't forget the i's. Okay, so it's plus or minus 9i. All right, let's try this, guys. So we'll subtract 42, and we get negative 40 divided by 5. Square root negative 8, don't forget the I, and then square root of 8 is 2 root 2. So we get plus or minus, don't forget your plus or minus also, 2i root 2. All right, you guys, if you are in our class, we're going to give you a worksheet, and there's the answers to the odds. And if you are interested, if you're not in our class, or if you want to, just email me if you want it. I'll email it to you, jbullock@sanjuan.edu. Anyway, And then there's a little bit more, and then I've got one more little slide for you right there. Whoops, no, one more, sorry. So here it is. All right, you guys, I hope that helps, and take care.